The name of American, which belongs to you in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. Sounds pretty good. It's not me. I found this old letter. Just reading through it. Check it out. You have in a common cause fought and triumphed together. The independence and liberty you possess are the work of joint councils and joint efforts of common dangers, sufferings, and successes. I wonder who wrote this anyway. His vocabulary is pretty extensive. I don't think we attended the same public school. Oh yeah, it's Mr. George Washington. Let's see what else he has to say.
Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of American Patriot. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Quick shout out to a couple of my faithful listeners, Rex and Miss Susie. You know who you are. Thank you for watching. Recently, I overheard someone talking about a farewell speech George Washington wrote to the American public as he was preparing to resign his post as President of the United States. Since I don't remember hearing anything about this during my public school career, I decided I would go ahead and sit down and read this 32-page letter. I was shocked to see how he predicted several things that are going on right this very minute. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a political mastermind. I try not to be political. I'm definitely not a mastermind at anything. But as I read this letter, one thing that clearly stood out to me from the beginning is how much of a patriot George Washington was. He had a through and through love for this country. And the main goal of his letter was, first of all, to announce that he was not seeking a third term as president. But right after that, he starts sharing some knowledge and insight as to things he's learned along the way as president, hoping somebody would read this and think about this along the way. So let's go ahead and dive right in and start reading. Some of the language can be kind of confusing, so we'll read through it quickly and then do a translation of sorts. Let's get after it. I have already intimated to you the danger of parties in the state, with particular reference to the founding of them on geographical discriminations. Let me now take a more comprehensive view and warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party generally. This spirit, unfortunately, is inseparable from our nature, having its root in the strongest passions of the human mind. It exists under different shapes in all governments, more or less stifled, controlled, or repressed, but in those of popular form, it is seen in its greatest rankness and is truly their worst enemy. The alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages, different countries, has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. Skip down just a little bit, it says, the disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual, and sooner or later the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty. It says, the common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it. So what's he telling us here? He's advising us to view ourselves as a cohesive unit and to avoid political parties at all costs because they cause division between the people. In another part of the letter, he talks about us being so involved and overly excited about political parties that we totally forget about liberty and forget about our cohesiveness as a nation. Does that sound like something that would ever happen? Let's move on. It says, all obstructions to the execution of the laws, all combinations and associations under whatever plausible character, with the real design to direct, control, counteract, or awe the regular deliberation and action of the constituted authorities, are destructive of this fundamental principle and of fatal tendency. They serve to organize faction, to give it an artificial and extraordinary force, to put in the place of the delegated will of the nation, the will of a party, often a small but artful and enterprising minority of the community. and according to the alternate triumphs of different parties, to make the public administration the mirror of the ill-concerted and incongruous projects of faction, rather than the organ of consistent and wholesome plans, digested by common councils and modified by mutual interests. So picture with me for a moment, and I know this is going to be hard to imagine. Can you ever imagine a certain party or political affiliation lifting up a small fraction of the community and allowing them to make decisions that affect all the rest of us? Can you ever fathom that happening? Let's move on. The unity of government which constitutes you one people is also now dear to you. It is justly so, for it is a main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, the support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. But as it is easy to foresee that, from different causes and from different quarters, much pains will be taken, many artifices employed to weaken in your minds the conviction of this truth, as this is the point in your political fortress against which the batteries of internal and external enemies will be most constantly and actively, though often covertly and insidiously, directed. It is of infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness, that you should cherish a cordial, habitual, and immovable attachment to it, accustoming yourselves to think and speak of it as of the palladium of your political safety and prosperity, watching for its preservation with jealous anxiety, discountenancing whatever may suggest even a suspicion that it can in any event be abandoned, and indignantly frowning upon the first dawning of every attempt to alienate any portion of our country from the rest, or to enfeeble the sacred ties which now link together the various parts. So he starts describing what liberty and freedom mean to everybody and how they're enjoying this up to this point. And then he immediately says, but wait, be on the lookout. There will be many internal and external forces coming against you to confuse your mind into thinking that this freedom and liberty thing isn't really what you want. He says right here, many pains will be taken, many artifices, which are things used to deceive and trick, many artifices employed to weaken in your minds the conviction of this truth, which is liberty and freedom. As this is the point in your political fortress against which the batteries of internal and external enemies will be most constantly and actively, though often covertly and insidiously directed, it is of infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union. Then he goes to telling us we must constantly be thinking about our liberty and our freedom. We must shun anyone that would suggest otherwise. Do we know of anybody that's suggesting that patriotism is racism? Can you imagine that happening? I already had my answer. I was just giving you guys some time to think. Yes, obviously that's what's going on right now. Lastly, he talks about how we should view morality and religion in our country. So let's dive in. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and cherish them. A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation desert the oaths, which are the instruments of investigation in courts of justice? And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Got to read that one again. And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in the exclusion of religious principle. But what does this mean? What he's saying, religion and morality, which go hand in hand, glue all of this together. Without religion, you have no morality. He states religion and morality are indispensable supports and pillars of human happiness, also the firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. But where did he get his information? He said right here in the letter, weren't you listening? Reason and experience.
Reason and experience
Both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in the exclusion of religious principle. You see, when the Founding Fathers sat down to form this experiment called America, they didn't just throw something together and hope that it stuck. They actually did their homework and looked at all the failed nations across the world, and none of the other experiments had ever succeeded. So they wanted to try something different. Seems logical enough, right? So this is how he finishes up. Man, I love this guy. He has some style. He says, "In offering to you, my countrymen, these counsels of an old and affectionate friend, I dare not hope they will make the strong and lasting impression I could wish, that they will control the usual current of the passions, or prevent our nation from running the course which has hitherto marked the destiny of nations. But, if I may even flatter myself that they may be productive of some partial benefit, some occasional good, that they may now and then recur to moderate the fury of party spirit, to warn against the mischiefs of foreign intrigue, to guard against the impostures of pretended patriotism, this hope will be a full recompense for the solicitude for your welfare, by which they have been dictated." So what's he saying? He says, I'm nowhere arrogant enough to think that this letter will ever make a difference whatsoever, or even help prevent our nation from following the path of every other nation before it. His only hope is that this letter would resurface from time to time, and those that read it would reflect on its knowledge and insight, that they may even be inspired to take it and help educate others. Why? Because he was a true American patriot. He had a fervent love for this country, for liberty, for freedom, as should we. So, Mr. Washington, I'm doing all I can to make sure your words live on. I encourage you to read the rest of this letter because, believe it or not, we just touched on it briefly. So guys, get out there and help educate each other on the wars being waged on our freedoms, which were brought to us by our forefathers and those who have fought for it since our inception. Let's do this right. Rise above. Patriot out.